Good morning and welcome to the Point. It is Monday, May 18th, 2020. So happy to have each and every one of you joining us this morning. Those of you joining us on the GBN Television Facebook page, the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel, the website gbn.gd, those of you on GBN channel 7, 11 and 20, and the listeners of Classic 105.5, 105.9, Hot 98.5, 98.7. Happy to have each and every one of you with us this morning. And the month of May, like we've said a few weeks ago, the month of May has been recognized as Mental Health Month, and the discussion continues here this morning as how we can best deal with our mental health, especially in these COVIDious times, as I put it, and dealing with what we need to do to stay mentally healthy. I have joining us once again is clinical psychologist in the Ministry of Social Development, Dr. Augustine Panchoo. Good morning, Dr. Panchoo.
Good morning, Blossom, and how are you doing?
I am fine, staying safe and healthy. I'm sure you're doing the same because you look healthy.
Yes, in fact, I was pleasantly surprised, and I thought I would adopt this for the day when you shared the philosophical underpinnings of what today should be. So I am having an amazing day, right?
Nice.
And I got this.
It's a good day to have a good day. I like that.
Yeah.
So let's get into it this morning, Dr. Panchoo. We're talking grieving, mourning in this COVIDious times. We're not able to grieve and mourn like we've grown accustomed to when it comes to saying our final farewells to our loved ones and family and friends. And I've been getting reports of it being a tough time for people to deal with. What reports have you gotten from members of the public in dealing with that aspect of the pandemic?
Well, I have received quite a lot of calls regarding persons and the state of mind regarding the inability to mourn and to grieve, especially at the loss of loved ones. Not only in addition to all the several calls that I've been getting, I have been working directly with people who are experiencing grief and loss. So I have somewhat of a very first-hand information about the psychological response that they're experiencing and how the family is doing, etc. So it is definitely a rough time for persons who have encountered or experienced loss in their lives at this time, and sending their loved ones off. But as we talk today about grieving and mourning, we're not just going to remain on the topic of death, but also of sickness and illness, because COVID-19 is one of the virus that there is no cure for. And ultimately, if you look, you will realize that over 300,000 persons have already succumbed. They have died from being affected by testing positive and for the virus.
Before we deal into adapting to these new times, let's deal with what we've grown accustomed to, the way that we grieve, the way that we heal. How important is it for people to grieve how they want to, in terms of going to the funeral or staying by a sick bed, and know? Yes, let's deal with that first. How important is it for us as the grievers and mourners to go through that process?
Okay. Let me start off by saying death, there is a finality to death. When death occurs. Now, sickness is something different. People have a tendency to rebound from sickness if it's not a terminal illness. Even when we are diagnosed with terminal illnesses, sometimes the doctors give us a couple of weeks, but we rally on. I have seen persons live for 10 years beyond the date that the doctor said, well, go home and make peace with your God and family. However, death, there is a finality to death. In other words, when you die, you are no longer participating in whatever exists on this earth. So there is a finality to you. There is no more your voice. There are only memories of you now. So that makes it really, really difficult for persons to, first of all, understand and to grapple with. And so today, this morning, I'm going to do a little education. Remember, GBN, that's the University of GBN to the point today. So I'm going to talk a little about a theory, a construct that guides people who grieve, who mourn the loss, whether it is for terminal illness and or death. So I'm going to introduce us and my listeners to a theory propounded by a famous psychologist, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, that she talks about. She has a little book. It's entitled Death and Dying, and how we grieve. And if anyone of my listeners is interested, one of these books that you can get on Amazon for $4 or $5, one of the very best-selling books on death and dying and grieving. And she introduced five phases of the concept of how we grieve and how we mourn the loss. And the first one is denial. So D is for denial, right? She introduced it. I have coined the meaning, and I call it DABDA, D-A-B-D-A. So the very first one, when we learn of any death, and that's the concept of Grenadians now. So let's come back home. We want to make this applicable to persons who are experiencing loss. You see what has happened as we are opening up now, Blossom, you have to appreciate, we're opening up 7 days of the week now, and the funeral agencies, they have a backlog of persons who need to be placed and given the final rites. Well, we were praying and hoping that we are going to open up to the point where we could have the usual kinds of funeral giveaway that we're accustomed to. And this is not the case now. So we still have the protocol established for physical and social distancing and sanitization, etc. So even though we are having quite a number of funerals, we're not having it under normal circumstances. So here is the first thing. When somebody dies, the very first response in many people, not all, because not everybody goes through the stages in the same way. And some people go cyclical. They go in stages from one to the other. Others, anywhere in the cycle, they fall. So usually the very first thing, Blossom and listeners, is for persons who experience loss, they're in denial. They ask the question, no, I can't believe it. You hear many Grenadians saying, you know, yesterday I saw a Facebook post on Magistrate Noel, right? That was surprised, and my very first response on Facebook was, tell me this is a mistake. Because why? You saw her apparently healthy a couple of hours ago, and now she is dead. And so the first response in the grieving cycle or the grieving stage is that of denial. No, it can't happen. No, this is not my brother. No, this is not my mom. This is not, you know, we just lost Curlin. I mean, young man in his prime of his life. And so the family is still asking, is it really true? People are asking, yes. And so when we don't have the opportunity, and this is what is really important for us to understand, at this time, many of us, for persons who have died, let's say the many 50-odd who have died in New York, we have not seen the body. Seeing is believing for a lot of us in the grieving process. When we don't see a body, we tend to still think, no, maybe it's a dream, maybe it's a hoax, maybe it's a fake news. And so we go through that process of denial. No, it didn't happen. No, it couldn't happen to me. No, I need a second opinion, you know? So what we're seeing in the Grenadian context now, I had one person call me and said, you know, my parent died. And I just got a call from I was about to call the funeral agency name, but one of the funeral agency, we want to bury tomorrow. Just like that. it was a couple of days. They had not released the body yet. They haven't, done the arrangements for finances, etc. But the call was, we're coming to this part of the country. We have 2 bodies assigned to be buried. We want to have a 3rd one. Are you ready for 2 days from now? And the funeral did happen, but you can understand the traumatic experience of that family. Already they have not had the finality of grieving, of the death, accepting or realizing and thinking that, yes, my mom is dead. And now we are about to put her down 6 feet under with a 30-minute kind of service and farewell. That's all we're allowed to at this time. So Blossom, it's a really hard time for our population. It is a really difficult time for persons who have lost loved ones, and especially the way we are now putting them and paying our final respects. It is a very trying time for our population, and this is going to get more difficult as the country continue to remain locked down and as we continue to increase the number of burials that we are having.
How can people cope in these times of not getting enough time to grieve, getting a call today for tomorrow, God willing, not being able to rely on the whole family because only 10 people can be here to show support to each other? How can people cope? What tips can they use to cope during this period?
All right. So before we go to the coping skills, I want to talk about one of the additional stages, and then it'll set the tone for to understand more about grieving, and hence we'll be able to appreciate more when we talk about how to cope.
Right.
The second stage in Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of death, grieving, and dying is anger. So the first stage, she says, you learn of the death or the terminal illness of a loved one, you go in a total state of denial. No, it didn't happen. I can't believe it. I need a second opinion. No, it's not my mom. No, it's not my son. No, it's not my neighbor. No, it's not. It's not. It's not. She says the second, when it starts sinking home that, yes, you have lost a loved one or a loved one is diagnosed with a terminal illness, we go to the second stage, that of anger. And I am glad, Blossom, that yesterday we had a National Day of Prayer, and this morning you had some beautiful music, so you set the tone for what I'm saying. A lot of times, our anger, or people's anger, when they experience death or grieving, is targeted towards God. Think about it. Why God?
Mm-hmm.
I go to church. We go to church. We pray. Why? And this is good because what happens is that we have to understand that as a Christian nation, whom we believe in, and because we believe in God, we tend to see him as supreme. And because we tend to see him as supreme, we tend now to blame bad things on him. So the very first target of our anger is, why God? And that is one of the questions that we have not been able, in the field of psychology and sociological thought, we have not been able to figure out yet. So let me go through the stages first, because I think it's really important for us, Blossom, to set the tone. So we have denial, we have anger. And then we have another stage is after we have blamed God, after we say, oh, so after we've gone through denial and then we start blaming God or somebody else. In fact, we move from God, blaming God for death and mourning, now to people, significant others in the family. Okay, so if we didn't get the answer, why God? Now we start thinking, well, maybe it's something a family member did and or did not do to cause mom to die, or somebody wasn't looking out for the baby and that's why he or she died. So we look for answer through our anger. But then comes when the anger subsides, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross says that we go through a process called bargaining. We start bargaining now with God, we bargain with people, with family. We start thinking, what is it that we could do or we could have done? We bargain. And then the fourth stage, she says, is the stage of depression. And this is where I want to set the platform for helping us to cope with death, dying, and to understand the psychology of grieving. We go through a stage of depression, meaning a lot of times we lose interest in the things that matter to us. We sometimes see the conditions as bleak. Think of it. You're a single parent, you lost your mom, you are now in the state of, where will I find money to bury? How difficult is it for persons right now without money? It is really difficult. And you can sense and see the anguish in the voice and in the faces of persons that you visit. Blossom, I want to encourage us. Let's take a break in a minute. It seems as though I might have to move in my physical space. So let's take a break.
No problem.
Let me talk about the last stage and then we'll take a break, okay?
Okay, no problem.
The last stage after depression, she says, is acceptance, where we come to breathe and to say, yes, I accept, this is my fate, and I am now in the process of grieving. So when we come back, I am going to establish the theory again of death and dying and grieving, and then we are going to talk about how can we help people navigate this very difficult time in their life.
No problem at all. All right, we're going to take a quick break, as Dr. Panchoo said, while he relocates, and then we're going to come back and complete the discussion as it relates to coping during these COVIDious times with mourning and grieving. This is To The Point on Classic, Hot, and GBN. We'll be right back.
Feel good facts.
Help prevent cold and flu by washing your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. That's the time it takes to remove most germs. No soap and water? No worries when you've got alcohol-based hand sanitizer.
Part of our social media revamp, the GBN is committed on providing accurate information by just one click through our social media platforms. You can now follow our Facebook page at GBN Television, together with our sister stations Classic FM Grenada and Hot FM Grenada. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, Grenada Broadcasting Network. They say one picture is worth 1,000 words. Now you have the opportunity to follow us on Instagram at GBN_news and our newly added WhatsApp feature to our news and current affairs department on telephone number 473-405-3052. GBN, with you, anywhere, everywhere.
No, that's not how you cross the pedestrian crossing.
Really? One day I just woke up and I saw pedestrian crosswalks on the road. No one really showed me how to use them properly.
Well, this is how it's done. You never cross before doing these things. They might save your life. First, when you get to the crosswalk, you stop. You look left, you look right. If there's a vehicle coming, you put your hand out, making eye contact with the driver, indicating that you want to cross. And only when the vehicle comes to a complete stop, you quickly cross to the other side.
Stop, look, hand out, eye contact. Wait for pedestrian to cross to the other side, then you happily continue on your journey. This message is brought to you by this group of insurance companies, the Traffic Advisory Body, and the Traffic Department.
Remember, if you have flu symptoms, do the right thing and stay at home to avoid giving it to others. Remember, you can be infectious up to a week after developing symptoms, so rest up and take it easy.
See it first on GBN. All the stories, from politics to industrial unrest.
Welcome back to the Point. We are speaking with Dr. Augustine Panchoo, clinical psychologist in the Ministry of Social Development. This morning we are talking mourning and grieving in COVIDious times. I really like that phrase, COVIDious times. Dr. Panchoo, before the break, you were finishing up Dr. Ross as we get into tips on how we can cope.
All right. So we have introduced the theory of grieving, and we talked about the denial. Starting off when we learn of a death in the family, we go through a phase of denial. Then we talk about the anger, and the anger especially directed at God and our family. We have a lot of unanswered questions, so we ask why did it happen? Why me? You know? And then we come to a stage called bargaining, where we sometimes we are not ready to accept it yet, but we're dealing with it. And so part of it is like, okay, God, if you were to, and a lot of times bargaining comes in, here is a good example of it. If it's a terminal illness, we'd say, Lord, if you were to heal me or heal my parents or heal my daughter or whomever it is, I promise you that we will serve you for the rest of our lives. We'll go to church, we'll be a good person, etc. That's the bargaining. That's a way of grieving. That's what happens. And then comes the depression. when we look at all, we have gone through denial, we have gone through blaming God, we have bargaining with God and higher power. Then comes depression, the state of anguish sometimes, because now it starts settling. And this is the difficult part here. It's during this time where we have to be very cautious with our population to help them to go through the process. So after the depression, then comes a sigh of relief, and we say we accept it. And a lot of times, here's what we do, Blossom. We come back, we say, you know, God knows best. The same God we punched and we ask, why God? Why? When we come to the final stage of the grieving process, we accept, we say, okay, well, maybe God knows better. Maybe there is a reason why. I may not see the reason now, but I understand that there is a reason why he got sick, or there is a reason why that young person died, why I'm grieving. So what can we do? I know before we go to the phone lines, we have to start talking now. What can we, as a psychologist, and we have quite a number of mental health professionals who are willing and ready to help and who have been working from the Ministry of Social Development, Ministry of Education, other individuals, private individuals in the capacity as private therapists and counselors. They have been offering services. What do we do? So let me start with the stage of depression. You know, because with the denial and the anger, people usually can easily get over that by time. You know, give it a couple of days, they'll stop blaming God. Give it a couple of days, they see the body, they go down to LACWA or to the agency, they see the body. So they come to the realization there is finality. Here he is lying, or she is lying, or she's in bed with a terminal illness. Yes, that is real. It's the depression we have to focus on, because the depression sets in when people start feeling helpless, hopeless, and daunted. They lose interest, Blossom. They lose interest in the regular things of life. We call that anhedonia. Anhedonia is the lackluster approach we have for life, especially if the person was a vivacious person, full of life. Or they were a people person. All of a sudden, you see that they start isolating because of the grieving. You have to start telling yourself, this person may need a little more than prayers, but they may need me to visit and to be able to interact with them. What COVID has done currently is to limit that social interaction, Blossom. So that is why it is even so more difficult for our population who are grieving. I attended one funeral last week, and of course social distancing, so I was way in a corner while the 10 family members were there, but I was in the vicinity, let them know that I was there to support them. And after you could see that they want to go home, they want friends, they want people to support them in the wailing and in the bawling and everything. They want the human contact. They want the human touch. They want the presence. They want your visitation in addition to your prayers. And when we deal with finality and grieving, that is healing for persons who are experiencing grieving. We want to know, and we want to know that others care about us. And right now, currently, COVID doesn't allow for a lot of that. So the grieving process is even more difficult for our population. So what do? We keep constant contact with people who are grieving, Blossom. Never let a day pass, maybe 2-3 times for the day without a phone call, without a hi, hello. Are you eating? Do you have food? What is it I can do? Do you want me to assist you with your laundry? How about your cleaning? I will put on a mask. I will come and I will clean your dishes. Have you taken a shower? Call and make sure, come on. Do you need something from the grocery? Do you need some food? And we could do a lot of those kinds of things, because even though we are under this strict restriction of physical and social distancing, we still can do it properly, attired and covered. And that is what is important for right now. You see, Blossom, there's so much to talk about grieving. I want you to understand that prior COVID, the way we were able to grieve, we had food, music, and family and friends visiting from day one, night one, until that person, whether that person lasts for 3 weeks or a month, every night there was food, there is prayer. Sometimes it's just visiting and watching the moonlight, not saying a whole lot, but the physical presence of others added to the ease with which we grieve. Now, when 7 o'clock, if there is a small gathering, we know we are in violation of the restrictions imposed on us by COVID. And so the grieving process continues to be a real traumatic experience for many, many, many persons. And I have family who lost loved ones in New York. And right now, people are trying to get a little glimpse of the YouTube video that was created for the funeral, because people can't visit, they can't do the normal stuff, the normal mourning. And there is something healing about crying that we need to understand. The ability to cry and to grieve and to say things and get it out of our system during the grieving and the mourning process is healing. It's healing for the psyche. And we're missing all of that. So right now we have to create, as therapists, what we do is try to create a pseudo sense of safety and a sense of mourning for families as they go through this grieving process.
There are people who are dealing with the loss of relationships and friendships, whether they be romantic relationships or just acquaintances, friendships, co-workers, because the pandemic has created the opportunity for there to be a loss or lack of communication, specifically face-to-face communication. Would the coping mechanism be the same? Because it's still a loss, it's still grieving and mourning. Would the coping mechanism be the same in terms of healing from it?
Absolutely. Let me tell you something. Every relationship breakup, I'm not talking about the floozy, excuse my sociologically intrepid explanation, but we call it floozy. Floozy infatuation on the street may not count. But every relationship where people became invested in the relationship and love was manifested, every time there is a separation and or a breakup, and it is like a divorce. So people go through the similar grieving process. Now, not everybody goes through all of the cycles, and not everybody starts from the denial. Some people could just start from the anger, or some people could just start from the depression. In fact, if you learn of a breakup in a relationship or a death, you could just close your door and go inside and just start off in the depressive state. But yes, relationships, marriages, infidelity, breakup, those kinds of things in this COVIDious times can elicit this similar state of grieving as though it is a death. Very good question. Very good question.
Thank you. Let's now open the phone lines. 435-2041 if you need to ask Dr. Panchoo a question as it relates to dealing with your mental health. This morning we were speaking about mourning and grieving. But of course, if there's a question that you or an assistance that you may need dealing with anything else related to mental health, feel free to ask Doc, and I'm sure he'll be able to answer as best he can. 435-2041 is the landline. You can also contact us on the GBN Television Facebook page, the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel, You can also pose your questions, comments, queries, concerns on the WhatsApp, but only written messages on the WhatsApp. We cannot take any voice or video calls. We cannot listen to voice notes, cannot look at pictures or videos. Only written messages, please, on the WhatsApp, and I will relay them to Dr. Panchoo on your behalf. Let's take our first phone call. Good morning.
Hello, good morning. Yes, I'm calling I know we have counselors in Grenada, but I want to know if we have a bereavement counseling service in this country to assist people in the time of bereavement. I'm talking about people who are specialized in counseling and bereavement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. Doc?
Okay, very good question. A bereavement arm of government, no, not necessarily. However, we do have a counseling unit, is a psychosocial support unit of the Ministry of Social Development. The number there is 440-4787. 440-4787. If you call that helpline, you will be directed to a clinician or therapist who is trained in the various aspects of clinical work, and so you can be directed. So if it's a crisis, if it's a breakup, if it's a bereavement, if it's grieving, you will be directed to an appropriate counselor who is trained to deal with your specific grieving. But a bereavement, no. I think bereavement mostly in Grenada is dealt with in an individual basis with private and persons, therapists and psychologists in private practice. So no, not a part of the government operations yet.
What is the role of plagues, famine, grasshoppers, droughts as punishment for a nation that goes astray? Okay, I don't think that has anything to do with mental health. How important is it for a person who is being there for a grieving person not telling them how to feel? Like the words stay strong or telling them their loved ones are in a better place. What can they do for a grieving person? Or to a grieving
very
person?
Good question. That's an absolute hit out of the park question, because a lot of people visit, and I tell you, they mean well, but sometimes their words and or their actions cause you to grieve, send you in a deeper state of grieving and depression. Saying God understands, saying that he's in a better place, saying all of those things is an effort to help and to soothe. But I tell you this, a lot of times, Blossom, it is better to just go and sit in silence and let your presence be the company for the grieving person, because you don't know what the person is experiencing at that time, and maybe just the words that you say may trigger them into a worse of state of depression than it is should be. So be careful what we say. Give people a little reassurance. Give them things to read. Give them a song. But be careful what we say, because one of the things I teach people in therapy and in psychological work, never tell somebody it is going to be all right, because you don't know and you can't make it right. And if you can't make it right, telling them it is going to be all right may just send them off to a different place. Yeah. So that's a very good question.
All right, let's go back to the phone lines. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Citizen Welsh. Greetings and greetings to Mr. Panchoo. Mr. Panchoo, or Pancho, whichever. Listen, I have never been a hypocrite. And when I tell you that I love to hear you, I mean it. You know, Grenadians had better pay attention to the things that you see. Congratulations, my dear boy. And you know, most of all, you express yourself, perfectly well in the language taught to us. 13 or more years in many cases, some of us go to school to learn English language and we can't use it. But you use it well, and I am proud of you. I love to listen to you. But hear this, Mr. Pancho. 2 weeks or so, or 3 weeks maybe, I asked you a particular question relative to the correlationship between air pollution and dementia. I don't know if you've done your research yet to answer, but I'm still awaiting. But here, I have another one for you. You may have heard of Albert Einstein. You ought to have heard of Albert Einstein, and he defined insanity as making the same mistakes over and over and expecting different results. Question, do you share this view? And if you don't, or whether you do or not, what do you think is causing us in this here country? I don't want to talk about other places for now. What do you think is causing us to be making repeated mistakes? So many repeated mistakes and not learning from it and expecting other results. Thank you very much and continue to have a nice day. Will you?
Thank you, Citizen Rolo.
All right. Listen, Blossom, I got some news, right? Because remember the last time he asked me on 2 different occasions. So the first question he asked me, I want to quickly answer it. He asked me, does the WHO, World Health Organization, have a mandate as to how many psychologists for a particular population? What's the ratio? Citizen Rolo, thank you for the question. I researched and I couldn't find it. When I researched, I didn't see the World Health Organization having a ratio for psychologists and counselors. They do have a ratio for doctors. You know, I want to say Cuba and St. Lucia rank first and second in the world in terms of doctors to persons in the population. It works out in St. Lucia to be about 200, a doctor to every 2,000 persons. Isn't that beautiful? I wish we had therapists and counselors every 2,000 persons. We had one, but I don't know. So let's leave that there. The second question. Yes, I found the research. Citizen Rolo, I want Blossom share my email with him under my number so he can contact me because I have research for him. I did find a research, Citizen Rolo, a very particular research. In fact, the research was just released by JAMA, J-A-M-A, which is the Journal of the American Medical Association in their March 2020. That's this year, a month and a half ago, March 30th. That journal is printed every week, 4 times a month, 48 times a year. And in their March 30th issue, there is a research presented there showing the relationship between smog and smoke, etc., for environmental difficulties and dementia. And there is a Citizen Rolo, you will learn that there is a correlation, there's a relationship. The research shows that. If you send me an email, I'm going to send you that article and you can look at it. In terms of Einstein, I'll tell you this about Einstein. Einstein is correct. If we keep doing the same thing over and over and we're expecting a different result, it is either insanity, stupidity, and some people call it perseverance. But I want to say that it augurs also for the rest of life. If we keep doing the same thing in life, if we keep pursuing the same relationship, Blossom, and we're getting the same result, if we're picking the same kind of man or the same kind of woman, or we're marrying the same kind of people, we are going to get the same kind of result, and it's going to end up in disaster for us.
That's true. Another question on the WhatsApp. Hold on, I'll ask that one a little bit later. When should the spiritual counselor refer clients to the clinical psychologist or other professional?
Well, I'll tell you this. I say usually the psychologist or the clinician is the person best prepared to do what is called crisis work. In other words, in the range of psychological need during mourning and a crisis, there is a role for everybody. There is a role for the spiritual person. There's a role for the sociologist. There's a role for the doctor, the nurse, the teacher. But there is also the role for the person, someone, a trained person to manage the crisis. So at what time? I say immediately, when somebody experiences a crisis, the best person to turn to for managing the crisis is a clinician who is trained to manage crises.
Okay, I got it. Somebody on Facebook, can you be happy and grieving at the same time because people show different signs?
Yeah, happy is such a relative term, right? Yes, we all wear masks. That's a sociological concept. That's not new. That's not me coining this one. But there is a phenomenon called the mask wearing. We wear masks. Okay, so somebody sees you in the market, Blossom, and they say, "How are you doing today, Blossom?" And you put on the big broadest smile, and you say, "I'm good," and you dance it away, right? But deep down, you have battles, or several battles going on at the same time. Bombs and missiles and dynamites have been released. And you know, it's like you just want to go in a safe place where you can just deal with it or mope and grin, whatever it is. But for the sake of your sanity and your reputation, you have to smile and say, "I'm okay." So the question is, can somebody smile and be grieving at the same time? Absolutely. But the smile may not be a smile of, "I've got it." Because during the grieving process, we have to allow people to be their real self. During the grieving process, sometimes when you're in anger, you don't want to see people close to you, you know. We develop what is called, sometimes we develop two kinds of anhedonia. You remember I talk about anhedonia. You have social anhedonia, where you don't want people to be close to you because you want to isolate. That's your safest bet. That's your safest way to deal with the grieving. Or you can have physical anhedonia, where you don't want the physical touch. You don't want anything to come close to you, right? So you don't want people to visit, as the social anhedonia, and the physical anhedonia, where you do not want people around you to touch you. And when people are going through these kinds of grief, we have to allow them the space. And that is an understanding that sometimes we don't, you know, we start thinking, I had a client, faraway place, you will never know. Childhood sexual abuse, family, and the parent of the child took some really proactive, you know, they wanted him locked up, etc., etc. And the police got involved, locked him up, and then the parents came, the parents who had influence in the society, etc., etc., and they promised to take charge of, I am pausing because that was so hurtful, and I just want to show you the link between grieving and those traumatic experiences. And so the parents decided that they wanted to oversee the welfare of that perpetrator. So I got involved in it on the side of the child and on the side of the family of the child. And within 6 months, in an interview with the parents, you know, the parents said to me, "Dr. Panchoo, I don't understand why our daughter is not speaking to us. I don't understand why she can't let go of what happened." And I'm saying to them, that's your granddaughter and your daughter who are affected. The point is, what I'm trying to make is sometimes people don't understand the length of time you need to process your grief. Because as you process your grief and our grief, there are things to consider. Forgiveness. Sometimes if you're hurt, like you talk about relationship, if you're hurt by someone in a relationship, you have to allow yourself or the other person time to go to the process of forgiving and to be able to process what it means to accept and to feel the hatred and the hurt that comes normally with grief. So right now it's a difficult time for Grenadian as we bury our dead. It's a difficult time for persons who are in fractured relationships. So there is a lot of work for therapists and counselors and psychologists, and I want to encourage young persons who have just matriculated from their first degree in college and or graduating high school to choose psychology as a career, because you will notice that year after year we have natural disasters. Now we have this pandemic, and Grenadian and the Caribbean and the world, we are in need of persons in the helping and mental health professional.
Can you grieve by yourself and come out okay at the end of it with no obvious negative effects?
Yes, you can. You can. People grieve differently. Grieving is like a personal. Grieving is a personal phenomenon. It's a personal situation. You give yourself enough time. The point is, there is no time in which to get over. Okay? If you lost your husband, you married for 30, 40, 50 years, and I just had a friend, a beautiful friend, oh Lord, God-given friend, minister of the gospel, pastor, and his wife, married for 57 years. And they retired, know them in the Caribbean and in California, and they retired to Florida. And 2 days ago, I had to watch, with tears bathing me, the funeral of his wife. Cancer. How do I tell him or give him a time span in which to grieve, in which not to want to see people, in which not to want to get into the sunlight? And they travel throughout the world, always on a ship, always somewhere. How do I tell him, get back up on the horse of life and live again? He is now missing a part of him. And as a result, that grieving process becomes time sensitive only to the person. You alone know the amount of time you need to go through your grieving.
Let's go back to the phone lines. Good morning.
Morning, Blossom. Bossing to the doctor. Now listen to the doctor, and all the things that he's saying is true and the realities. But Doc, I'm also saying that I think death and thing have like a 4 waves in it. Like for me, when the first day the person die, that is one. Then the grieving start. Then the day preparation for the burial. Then the day of the funeral. And then after that, you always live with a reflect. There's always reflect coming. Because that person, according to how the relationship with you and that person, you really miss them. You always. And I think for some, they're just buried, but they're not gone. They are wrong all the time, all the time. When I had someone that died, and one close to me said, "Oh, you're happy that person died." But then I had to act. When they tell me that, I went to a pastor and asked him. Then the pastor gave me the console. I said, "People grieve and days," because I was like jolly calling people, telling people this, that. But that was the way of I feeling free. But after that, maybe in the night time, then when people not around me, then you see my real loneliness come. But it's like you just have to put on a braveness in the front. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, caller.
Yep, the grieving process is something that has to take its course. And when you look at Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's theory of death, dying, and grieving, you may see her presented as a cycle. We go through a cyclical period of grieving. However, it is possible for you to start off with the denial and then go to the anger, and then go to depression, and then go back to the anger. You may not necessarily go through every stage in order. And that's why I refer to it as a phase of grieving rather than a stage, because generally in developmental psychology, when we look at stages, we are looking at a progression from less capable to more capable. In the grieving process, it's not like that. It's a cycle, and you can start and finish anywhere in the cycle. So we got to give people a time to grieve. We got to give them a time to be annoyed and to deny and to cry and to bargain and to go in their depression, and finally for them to reach the stage where they have accepted and they can now move on with their life in a very manageable way.
I have a question I really wanted to ask on WhatsApp. I'm very good at hiding my hurt even when it hurts really bad because other family members look up to me. Is it dangerous to my health? And secondly, I lost my sister a month ago and I'm not angry at God. I'm angry at her for leaving me. Is that normal?
Absolutely. That is normal, my friend. I challenge you. You are in the right place. Because the anger has to be, remember I said the anger has to be directed somewhere? The anger, you may be at a different phase in your anger direction, and so you're not angry at God for taking her, but now you're angry at your sister. Maybe she, and I'm not saying I don't know, but what if, let me ask the question, Blossom, what if your sister was engaged in unhealthy practices that could have led to her demise? You could understand?
Right.
How the anger is going to be directed at that person.
Right.
If you have been talking to your father, year come a mother, about alcohol and alcohol consumption and drug abuse and misuse, and you learn that your father is taken down now with cirrhosis of the liver or lung cancer, whatever it is, if he was smoking, he's the one that your anger is going to be targeted. You have a son who is in disruptive behavior and he goes to prison and or he dies. You are going to direct the anger at him and you are going to blame him for your grief, which is really good. That's a very good point.
And the person also asks if it is dangerous to their health to hide their hurt because family members look up to them.
You know what? I tell you this, it could be dangerous. I don't know the situation. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're hiding your hurt and so it is dangerous. No. However, what I want to tell you is that one of the good things as a psychologist, what I teach is to get the feelings out. There is a word that we use for that, is called catharsis. When we get the bawling out and when we get the slamming your fist against the bed, or you throw the glass of water, or you roll on the ground and you roll and you bawl. There is something cathartic about that. It relieves some of the frustration.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times I tell clients, if you bottle it up, there is going to be an explosion one of these days. It is going to explode. So the best thing is to express it. The more you express your feelings and your anger and your anguish and your true feelings, is the less likely that it is going to kaboom one day and everybody is going to know that is what you were dealing with. Yeah.
As we wrap up this morning, Dr. Panchoo, a way that people can reach out to you or any other professional that they can seek assistance to deal with their issues. There are many. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, there are many private persons who offer private. I am not. I can't advertise for them on this medium. However, what I could say is that since I work with the government and the Ministry of Social Development, I am allowed to allow you to call the Division of Social Development, Ministry of Social Development, 440-4787. That's our helpline. I could be reached through that also, but you can also call me at 406-3601. That's my direct line, 406-3601. All right. Thank you so much again, Dr. Panchoo, for shedding some light and tips on how we can deal with our mental health during these COVIDious times.
Yes, thank you, Blossom. Thank you for having me. And we have one more week. After this week, we have next week to go. So I'm looking forward to appearing one more time. I want to, when we come back next time, for the last time for Mental Health Week, I want to talk We want to talk about abuse in our society, especially what happened on the Western side and other stuff that we're going to talk about, how to help families to deal with abuse and neglect and all the fun stuff, not fun stuff, but all the traumatic stuff that has been happening in Grenada during this COVIDious time. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Have a great morning.
Have a good Monday. That was clinical psychologist in the Ministry of Social Development, Dr. Augustine Panchoo, as we deal with May as Mental Health Month. Some tips, advice on how we can continue to cope during the pandemic. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to The Point once again. Always appreciate it. That's the end of my time today. Joseph is up next with Mid-Morning Buzz. Be safe if you're heading out. If you do not have to be on the road, stay home and stay safe. Be healthy. Have yourselves a blessed Monday. I'll be back with you tomorrow, God willing. Until then, COVID is still out there. Protect yourselves.